One time we were at an equipment depot, and we were picking up artillery shells and powder for 175 artillery. That's the really big stuff. 20,000 pounds, 22,000 pounds. High explosives and powder for it. Fuses, the whole thing. And we were just cleared the fence. All of a sudden, our front windshields got covered with oil. I mean, instantaneously. We couldn't see. James R. Oliphant, spelled Oliphant. And just so you know, that's Scottish.
Okay.
Yeah.
Where did you grow up?
I grew up in San Diego, California, and had an outrageously great childhood.
Was your family military or no?
My grandfather was Navy. He was a full colonel or captain in the Navy. And my dad was, my grandfather was a physician. My dad's also a physician. He was in the Second World War in the Navy.
Was he a physician in the Navy, or was that after the Navy? Oh, he was?
No, when he graduated from medical school,
that's what he
put him right into the Navy. And from there, he ended up in the Marine Corps, doctor, and he made 6 landings in the Pacific.
Wow.
On the first wave. He was I can't think of the exact term, responsible for the beach on the initial landings. He was the ranking officer on the beach.
Would he talk about that or no?
I know a little bit about it. And the reason they had a physician on there was that actually he was responsible for evacuating people off the beach and controlling the flow of people on, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so, and he did 6 of those. There were 10 doctors that were assigned to that. He was the only one that survived the Second World War on those landings.
Wow.
So.
How did you end up in Vietnam? Give me that story.
I was drafted.
What year?
And that I did make a note of. I was actually drafted in 1966.
How old were you then? In 1966? Were you just 18?
No, I was 23.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'd been drafted 3 times before that.
Yeah, give me that story.
And what the deal was I was in college. I graduated from high school at 17. When I went to college, I was 17. So I was younger than most. And I went to St. Louis University. It's a Jesuit-run university in St. Louis. And they only had 300 undergraduates at the university. It was basically a graduate school.
What were you studying?
They only had 4 majors, and they had medical, dental, law, and accounting. That's all they had. And undergraduates was not their thing, but there was 300. And I was one of the 300 in there. And my grandfather and my father had both graduated from there. My mom had. But the issue was, after 3 semesters there, I was being counseled by my parents, grandfather, you don't want to become a doctor. The medical
they were saying this
profession is not what it used to be. You don't want to do it. Right? And it's okay. So I decided I was really interested in architecture. And so I went looking for a school with an architectural degree, and that's pretty rare. And so I left St. Louis U at the mid-year after the 3rd semester and was accepted to go to Arizona State University. Actually had a school of architecture that I was accepted to, but I couldn't start midterm. So I returned back to San Diego and went to San Diego State College, now university, for a semester. That worked out timing wise. And then did a summer school there, and then went to Arizona State. And architecture is a 5-year degree. You have to take design, which is a 5-hour class, every semester. Got to take 10 consecutive semesters. So I basically started back as a freshman on a 5-year program, and that got me in trouble, really, in a way, with the draft. So when I got to my 4th year of college, which was the second or end of the second year or something of ASU, they sent me a draft notice. And I went down to my local place. Both my dad and my grandfather were in the Navy. So I started out the Navy, and I decided that if I was going to go in, I wanted to be a pilot. And I thought, flying off aircraft carriers would be the thing to do. I found out later that's not a thing to do. It's lucky I didn't. But anyway, I took all the testing, got everything squared away, all the physicals and everything to go ahead to the list. But before I got enlisted, I got a notice and they deferred me. So that was good.
Is that because they had too many pilots or something? Is that what it was?
No, it's just because the draft board looked at it and says, "Oh, well, yeah, he needs more, more time in school."
Okay.
And then about every 6 months, I got drafted, and they just put me on the draft. And so the second time I went down to the Navy, and they didn't have any openings for me, in flight school. So I went over to the Air Force, and they did. And they said, "Fine, we got all your physicals and everything for the Navy. Yeah, we can do that." I got deferred again.
When you were getting deferred, were you relieved, or were you excited to go in, or were you relieved that they deferred you?
I'd like to finish architecture. That was my goal.
Yeah.
My goal was never to go into the service.
And at this point, are you tuned into Vietnam War at all, or no? Not that much because you were young.
Not that much. I mean, I'm still 19 years old.
Yeah.
And so then another 6 months goes, I get drafted again. And neither the Navy or the Air Force could take me. Army wasn't high on my slot. Tried the Coast Guard. They didn't have any openings, but I got deferred a third time. Now I'm a 4th year architecture student, but I've been going to school now for 5 or 6 years, and they drafted me. I didn't get a deferment on the 4th one. So I got pulled out when I was in my 2nd semester of 4th year, which they figured, well, you 4-year degree, that's what you do. You should be done. Should be done. They didn't accept the argument, well, I have another full year to go. So they drafted me. I didn't really want to go in drafted, so I did enlist, and I went in as just an enlistee. I was assigned to Fort Bliss, Texas. Is where I took my basic training.
What was that like?
I had the easiest basic training anybody's ever had, I think. I did go back and check my notes. Apparently, they must have known that I was already going to be commissioned.
When they put you in there?
Yeah, when they enlisted me, I guess. But I did go to basic training.
And why do you say it was easy?
I became the platoon leader for my basic training unit. Everybody lived in these World War II barracks on cots. The typical thing you see at the movies, basic training thing. I had a private room. I never lived on the floor because they had a sergeants lived in the barracks, but they had a separate room.
Did you catch a rash for that from the guys?
No, I never did.
Did they know you were? Did they know you were living in luxury or no?
Well, I lived in the same barracks with them, but I was in a private bedroom in the sense, with a cot, in a window where I could see down the barracks and stuff. So I became the platoon leader. I had my nice thing there. I had the advantage. I never got inspected.
Wow.
When they did inspections for everybody else, they just walked by my door, so I never got inspected. Never did KP, never did guard duty.
Oh my gosh.
Didn't do any of that.
And were your drill sergeants, were they ex-Vietnam guys or no? Do you remember that?
I don't remember the guy's name, but our drill sergeant was our unit that I was in was very interesting. They were all from the New York area, right?
Yeah.
All with, New York accents and stuff.
Yeah.
I'd say a third of them were gang members.
So it was a rough crowd then.
It was a really, really tough group. I don't know where they picked them up in New York, but it wasn't in the high class areas. And our drill sergeant was black. And I later figured out that they always kind of, at least back then, did that because there was a lot of racial prejudice on everybody out on the floor there. With a direct,
so that helped release tensions on the floor.
Oh yeah, no. And he was a martial arts instructor before he became a drill sergeant.
Did you enjoy the physical aspect of boot camp?
Yeah, just loved it. Yeah, we did everything, and it was interesting to watch how that transformation happens between recruits coming in that don't even want to be there, with their long hair and all the stuff, getting their hair shaved off, the clothes are gone, and how fast they can adapt when you basically punish them a lot. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Do group punishment.
Yeah. You break them down and build them back up.
Break them down. Else. Yeah. Yeah.
At this point, did you know you were going to fly for the Army or no?
Well, I didn't know for sure.
But you were hoping.
I wasn't sure where I was going.
Yeah. Okay.
I went in and enlisted.
Yeah. Okay.
And anyway, I graduated number 1 in my class from basic training, whatever that's worth. Then I went to AIT. I wasn't aware, but apparently they had orders for me to go to OCS. They didn't tell me that. I was still enlisted. And so my MOS, I went in originally for to be a aircraft mechanic. They still didn't have orders for me, so then they put me into another class, a rotary wing, single engine, dual rotor mechanic and crew chief.
Where did you go do that at?
We did that at Fort Rucker.
Okay.
And so that was the H-21 helicopter. They used to call that the banana.
Okay, yeah.
It had a 15-cylinder radial engine in the middle, and then it drove two rotors, one at each end, similar to what a Shucks like, in the rotor system. And it was the heavy lift helicopter up to that point.
Did you enjoy doing that, working on that, or no?
Oh, yeah. I can rebuild a 15-cylinder radial engine. I can rebuild gearboxes, whatever you want. I can take care of that. So I went through, everything, powertrain, structural, everything on a helicopter. And then finally some orders came down, and I didn't know where I was going. The only place they had H-21s was in Alaska. So this was the last class that they were ever going to have on them, because they were going to take them out of the service. And they were up in Alaska. So the whole class was going to Alaska. So I'm thinking, I'm going to end up in Alaska, taking care of these H-21s. Instead, the orders came down, and I had orders for Fort Sill, Officer Kennedy School.
Okay.
So that was a little bit of a surprise. But in retrospect, all they was waiting is for the class to start. They just kind of put me in places, right? So I got to Fort Sill. I thought that was interesting. It had a lot of, with the architecture, it's an engineering degree back then.
Okay.
And so I had all the math and all the stuff for engineering and everything. And I thought, oh, well, why am I not going to the engineer corps? That would be a good place for me. Don't know anything about artillery. And, but when I got there, I found out virtually everybody in my class were engineers or had at least through calculus.
Interesting.
And the reason for that is artillery's all math. And back then, it was all on slide rules. We didn't even have little handheld calculators. They didn't exist. So no computers, no calculators. Everything's longhand with a slide rule.
Did they train you on a particular gun? Or
No. When you go through the training, it's a 9-month school.
Okay.
And what, you get the officer side of training, but spend a lot of time learning tactics and how to employ, because you're going to be an officer in the unit, say of 120 people or something, but there won't be that many officers there. But you're going to, be running fire direction center. You're going to be the CO or the XO or something like that.
Yeah.
And so that's what we were being trained. It was a lot of fun. You learned a lot of stuff. And I liked being out on the OP, the observation point, and go out there and call in fire at Fort Sill and blowing up things. That's fun and everything. And so we're about 2/3 of the way through the school. And it dawned on me, watching a class or two before us that graduated, one, you're all going to Vietnam. They don't need artillery officers any other place at that time. So you're going to go to Vietnam, and then you find out actually what you're going to be as a forward observer.
And describe that.
Well, you're not the company commander. You're not the executive officer. And you're not the guy back there running the fire direction center for the guns. In fact, you're not even with the guns. You're the one out in front of everybody with visual sight of the enemy. You can't hit anything if you can't see it. So the forward observer, you have a sergeant with you. He carries the radio and the gear, and you go out.
Is it just 2 guys, or is it more?
Just 2.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. You got a radio, 2 guys, and you're self-sufficient, and you're hiding, trying to find something, a target to shoot at, right? That means you're within range of them also. And so typically you're looking for roads, pathways they're using. It's kind of like going hunting, and you're looking where the deer or the elk or whatever, have been walking, find that. And anyway, that's what you do. And I thought, I don't think that's really what I want to do. Yes. Nothing against the sergeants or anybody. No, you know what I mean. That I want to be out there by myself, basically, calling in fire on somebody. So then I went back. I think flight school sounds really good. So I went ahead in, like I said, about 6 months into this, 9 months or something, I put in an application for flight school. And that went real well. I took the physicals and everything, which back then were very tight. They're much looser now. You had to be perfect. I mean, they didn't let people in flight school just because they wanted to be a pilot. And so anyway, went through all the testing and everything. That was fine. Got orders pretty quickly. I mean, I had orders for flight school probably 2 weeks after I applied. So then I knew I wasn't doing artillery anymore. So I finished artillery. Everybody else I know went to Vietnam. I stayed back. And flight school's probably 10 or 11 months by the time you get there and get out and all of that. So I went to flight school down in Fort Walters, Texas. At the time, that was the busiest airport in the world.
How was flight school?
Probably because they had a couple thousand helicopters there.
Wow.
Taking off and stuff. I loved flight. I liked flight school. I had a lot of, before I was in the military, I did a lot of automobile racing from the first time I got a driver's license. I mean, all the way up to the time I actually went in service. I mean, serious car racing and stuff. And I'm extremely good at it. And so in motorcycles and all that stuff, I knew what I was doing. So helicopters was just another thing. The mechanical side of it, I've already been through the schools on how they work, what they did. So I was extremely lucky. I had an extremely good flight instructor. So the rules back then was you had to have at least 10 hours of flight time to solo. Nobody soloed before 10 hours, which kind of makes sense. And they give you the 20 hours. If you didn't solo about 20 hours, they cut you out of the program. I soloed at 6. I mean, just weeks after I got down there.
And what are they flying you in? What are they training you in?
TH-55.
Were they fun to fly?
They were fun to fly. Yeah.
And the first time you soloed, were you nervous or were you just excited?
No, I wasn't at all. Not even concerned about it. I'll tell you a story. I didn't know I was going to do that. I'd show up. I mean, we're just like 2 weeks into the program, something like that, on the flight line. And my instructor comes out and he says, they take us out to the flight line. And he says, Oliphant, go out there and start up one of the helicopters so-and-so. Well, we weren't allowed to start up helicopters without an instructor in it, right? So you had to question him and said, are you sure? And he says, oh yeah, go ahead and go out there, get started, warm it up for us, So I did. And he comes out and he says, 15 minutes later, and he says, go out there, take a couple laps around the traffic pattern, and then come back. I didn't even give a second thought to it. I didn't even miss him. I just, picked it up, taxied out, called the tower, took the runway, took off. Not even a concern. Because I knew I could do it. I mean, that wasn't anything. I'm on downwind where you turn back, and I'm just starting to turn for base, is what they call it. And then it dawned on me, I'm 500 feet in the air, and and I got to get this thing back on the ground. Taking off is not hard. I said, that's when it dawned on me. I was actually flying by myself. I mean, literally. And I landed, and tower says, "Okay, take off again." Second round, not even. He came back, parked it. I didn't even realize what I'd done.
It was just that natural.
Yeah, not a thing. And so we're on the bus going back to the base. Everybody on the bus, everybody, at the school knew I soloed at 6 hours. I didn't know that. We're going back. They stop at the Holiday Inn, right? Drag me off the bus and throw me in the pool at the Holiday Inn, and I still don't know why. I mean, this has not even crossed but that was the tradition down there. You solo, they throw you in the swimming pool at the Holiday Inn. Yeah. I'd never observed that, or I didn't know. And so that's how I started my flying career. My instructor, virtually every time we went out to fly, he'd have a newspaper, Dallas or whatever, a newspaper, and he'd sit there reading a magazine, or he'd have the newspaper. He can't even see out the front, sitting there and just telling me, well, do this and do that and do this. And that never bothered me at all. I'm thinking everybody else is doing the same thing. I don't know, but that's what we did. And then at the end of that 4.5 months, the primary helicopter training, he says, "What do you want to do? Let's go do something. This will be our last flight. What do you want to do?" And I said, "Let's go find out what the service ceiling is on this helicopter." Right? Because up to now, I've only flown at 500 feet. They don't go above that in primary helicopters. And so we spent the next hour and a half, and we got up to 11,000 feet. And that's everything it's got. Above ground, not total altitude, above ground, 11,000 feet AGL. And we get up there, and we're looking, guys, we're over time. We can get this helicopter back. So we decided to auto-rotate from 11,000 feet. So we cut the engine power and you just kind of float down. Unbeknownst to us, the engine was icing up because it was just at idle. And it had cooled off. And we get down to like 300 feet, and I go to roll in some power to land, and the engine wasn't there. It had quit. So we're not at the airfield, we're out someplace, And so all of a sudden, my instructor did get involved, and he's over there cranking the starter on the motor while I'm doing an auto rotation, hoping he can get the starter, get the motor started. And actually he did, probably at 100 feet or something. The motor coughed alive, and we landed out there. And he says, "Oh, that's good. I didn't want you didn't want to have the helicopter out where we're not supposed to be." Anyway, flew back. That was my last flight to TH-55. Loved the airplane. Really. We used to play tic-tac-toe. We go out where it's sandy, and I'd draw a tic-tac-toe thing with the skids in the ground, and then I'd put X's and he put O's or whatever, and we'd play tic-tac-toe. That's how we practice hovering.
That's cool.
I did lots of stuff most people didn't do.
But by the time you leave there, how many times have you practiced auto rotation? How many auto rotation landings have you done, probably?
Oh, I don't know, maybe a dozen, something like that.
Yeah.
Enough.
Yeah. You felt comfortable doing those?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. You did the flare at 3 feet. You're coming down to 3 feet, and then you flare and set one of those down. And, you're almost hitting the ground. But anyway, so I left there. I was first in the class, both flying and the academic part of it.
Yeah.
That was all easy stuff. Went to Fort Rucker. It was interesting. When I went to Fort Rucker, you pack up all your stuff, and then they were shipping the stuff by bus between the two, right? The baggage sites, Greyhound buses. My bags, of course, said AL on it for Alabama. My bags got chained someplace. Some baggage guy thought that meant Alaska. And sent all my equipment, all my uniforms, everything to Alaska. So when I got to Fort Rucker, I didn't have anything, But anyway, we got that squared away. Then we graduated into Hueys. So then we started flying Hueys. That was fun. Lots of.
Were they the H or the D? What were you in? You remember?
No, they didn't have those. They had A's.
Okay.
A's.
Similar size?
No, they're smaller. The
Okay.
doors are a lot smaller.
Okay.
Then they made them longer because of the stretchers and stuff that they wanted to put in them. But originally, that sliding door was 2/3 that size.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, we had bees when the bees came out. That was a big deal, And but anyway, we got there, and you're doing instrument flying and large cross countries and landing and weird things. The most exciting thing that happened there to me was we were doing a night insertion of troops from one of the bases. I think it was in, I don't know, East Coast bases, infantries.
Yeah.
And we'd pick them up, and then the idea was we were going to make a night insertion of them. And I was the lead helicopter of a flight. Had an instructor with me, and we're looking for a flashlight shining red.
Somebody signaling you.
Well, what they do is they have other units are out there, and they clear an area or find an area. They do all the stuff they would be responsible for. So when you're doing a night landing, they set up just a flashlight, red filter on it, and a cone on it, so you can only see it basically straight on.
Right.
There's no other. And they set it in the ground at the altitude that misses all the trees or any obstacles out there. So the idea is you find that red light, and then you fly that down. If you lose it, then you got to correct it and pick it up again. But you fly to the red light. Just a flashlight. It's nothing big. No other lights out there. So I got like 6 or 8 helicopters behind me. I'm the lead guy. So I got to find this flashlight. And we find the flashlight and start making the approach in. And every once in a while you lose it, make a correction, and everybody else is making movements because they can't see the flashlight. They're off.
Because are they watching you?
They got to fly on me because they're off to the side of me.
Right.
And behind me, they can't see it.
Right.
I'm the only guy that can see it. And we're flying in, and I was doing a pretty good job of this. I mean, we were doing great. I almost flew us right into the ground like at 80 knots.
Oh, because you had no perception of where the ground.
I could not see the ground, and I was flying to that flashlight, and it doesn't change and get brighter or do anything, And we were probably, I'm going to say 15, 20 feet from hitting the ground when the instructor that was with me noticed that we were not in the air. We were almost crashing, and he grabbed those controls, and I don't know where we went. I mean, just you get disoriented. You can't see anything. And he grabbed those controls, and we hit the ground pretty darn hard. Pretty hard, Everybody else did all right, I guess, because they could see us, But, I learned something there. You do not want to make night tactical approaches. Not the best idea. But that was the most exciting thing that happened to me in flight school. But anyway, when we finished flight school, I was still the undergraduate and basically aced everything. And it came time to make a pass-in review where they take all the people in the class. I mean, you're putting up 60, 80 helicopters, some number like that, and they all get like in a formation, like you're.
Or they're pasting them on the board, so you know which one you're picking. Is that what it is?
Yeah, what slot you're in and all that. And
like a draft, kind of.
Yeah, and then you're supposed to fly across Fort Rucker. That's
Okay.
And then you land, and then you graduate.
Okay.
Right. And I'd watched that a couple times, and I decided I didn't want to do that. I mean, we had 2 people killed in flight training. That was normal. I mean, flight training wasn't free. People got killed in flight training. And you watch this pass-in review, and one guy messes up, and then 5 other people have to adjust, and it just.
So you don't want to fly in that.
And I'm saying I don't want to fly with my fellow students in there. Don't want to do that. And they told me, no, you have to. You don't graduate unless you fly in that formation. And I said, I'm not doing it. Why are you not doing it? I said, I don't want to fly with those guys. I do not want to do that. And I didn't.
Were they mad at you the whole time or no?
No, I was on the ground where we were going to graduate, watching them fly over with my parents. They put the parents down there and everybody flies by, and all that kind of stuff. No, I was standing with my parents and my wife on the ground. Didn't do it. Never got any repercussions for it or anything. I thought that was interesting. I graduated, undergraduate of the class, and then the Department of the Army called me and said, where do you want to go? What do you want to do? And I said, I get a choice? I thought, I'm going to Vietnam. And they said, no, you can do other things, So I said, what I want to do is fly a CH-54 for a company that when I graduated from OCS, well, I had a short, it was like 8 or 9 months before I get into flight school. I was in the 355th Aviation Company and helped form them as they were going to Vietnam. So I was the only officer at the company for like 6 months. And they were a flying crane unit. So I knew what flying cranes were. I was familiar with them. I'd actually accepted them and signed the paperwork for them and all the parts and the people and all that stuff. And so I said, no, I think I'll go with the 355th will be coming back. I'll do flight cranes over there with them. I know the people, I know the unit. And son of a gun, if I didn't get orders for that.
You didn't get orders?
I did.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Yeah, I'm the only person that ever graduated from flight school and went right into, the world's largest helicopter and most sophisticated piece of equipment the Army had back then.
Just tell me the name and describe it for me.
The official name is Tarhi, which is Indian. All helicopters are named after Indian tribes. A Hueys really an Iroquois.
Okay.
They rarely use that. A CH-54 is a Tarhi. I have no idea where those Indians are. Never heard of Tarhi Indians, but that's what we were. But the official name was CH-54. They were built by Sikorsky. And for the time when they were built, so I was flying them in 68. Yeah.
How big? How much horsepower?
It's time they were the world's largest helicopter. They had 9,600 shaft horsepower coming off turbine engines. The same engines they have in an F-4 fighter jet. And
how big are they?
They're basically 100 foot in length, 25 something feet tall. Have two pilots with a third pilot's seat facing backwards. Still the only aircraft I know of in the world that has a pilot's seat that faces the tail of the aircraft. And so they were the most powerful, biggest thing going. And all the people that were flying them, there's only 3 units of these in the world. I helped form the 355th company.
And how many helicopters are in a unit?
A unit has 9. We have 9, so there's 27 of them in the service. And there's about 35 of them built, but the others were used for testing and all that kind of stuff, But there were 27 actually active duty.
What made you want that one in particular? Was it just the duty they did? Was it your experience before or what?
Well, I'd go over and replace some people that I was familiar with and I knew where they were,
The idea of
what they were doing.
The idea of dust off when the others was...
No, it's kind of like being a forward observer. Yes, being a gunship pilot, it's the training's great. That's not my,
Yeah.
I was not planning to be in the service.
Yeah.
Happy to serve, but I'm just doing my thing. And so gunships wasn't good. Flying slicks, doing insertions. You see those in the movies and stuff. That's just, that's chaos. Absolute chaos, and flying Chinooks, kind of the same thing. So anyway, I went to flight seat 54. So I went direct from flight school to flight seat, transitioned into 54s. Everybody that was flying, those flying cranes was a name they used for it, was basically CW4 warrant officers.
Okay.
And the reason for that was everybody else flying C-54s were going for the 3rd tour in Vietnam. They'd been over there in the Hueys, maybe had flown Chinooks in the 2nd wave over, right? And now they're getting called up. These are the guys that were doing this before Vietnam started.
Right.
Right. And now they're tapping them to go back for a 3rd time, and guys would just quit. These are the guys got 18 years in, and they just say, I've done 2 years in Vietnam. I've been, don't want to go a 3rd. Now they're in their 30s type thing.
Yeah.
They got families and all that. And they said, no, I don't want to do that. So to entice them, because they needed experienced pilots.
Yeah.
They'd offer them the CH-54 slot. And so not all of them, but some of them would take that. So that was, these are the best aviators in the Army at that time. Most experienced, know what they're doing.
Did they send you somewhere to train on that copter then?
Yeah, it was at Fort Rucker.
Okay. How long was the training for that?
Officially 6 weeks in the helicopter, but by the time you do everything, it's more like 3 months.
From a pilot perspective, was it a lot different flying that copter than the Huey?
No, easier. We're the only helicopter that has air conditioning. That's the first good thing. It's air conditioning because we can lift a lot. The windows were bulletproof in it. I mean, like 3-inch thick glass.
You said it was computer controlled.
It had an automatic flight control system in it. Now, the Army, at least when I was in, they didn't have any automatic navigation or any of that kind of stuff. But the flight control system is similar to the jets that the Air Force has now, that they don't fly without the computer. You can't physically handle everything and fly it. That's the same thing with the CH-54. It's got so much horsepower on that thing and it's so responsive. I mean, it's really responsive that, and you have to be absolutely stable because you have a winch in. That's why they call it a flying crane. It has a winch in there. They could pick up 20,000 pounds and winch it up to the aircraft. And so you got to be able to come to a hover and then pick things up to it. It can't move. And the things you're placing have to be exactly, I mean, within less than a 1/4 inch dimensions, And so you have to be it has to be really stable in any conditions.
At the end of that training, were you a little nervous to go over to Vietnam? Or you?
No, I don't get nervous.
Okay. Flying over to Vietnam, how did you go over on a commercial airline?
Yeah, well, I did. Yeah.
You remember which one?
Flying Tiger. Does that sound right?
Mm-hmm. And where did you land?
Cameron Bay.
And getting off the plane, what'd you think?
It's at Airfield. It's at there. They held me there for a couple of days until they could get me transported up to the unit. I had something there happen that was interesting. They just have you in tents there, in cots. I mean, there's lots of people coming into country, people leaving from country. It's lots of people there. So I just have a cot in a tent. And I had my wallet stolen. I don't think I'm the first one. But the only thing I was concerned about, it had my military ID in it. So I thought, that's kind of important to know. And I reported it. They didn't seem to be too concerned about it. They just printed another one, handed it to me, But, well, I was sleeping, so I had it in my pillowcase.
Wow.
But you're tired when you get over there. You got to adapt to the climate. That's why they hold you there for a couple of days, I guess. And then they sent a Chinook down to get me. And it was, I guess, like a taxi cab. I think it did it every day. Picked up people here, and then you made stops, dropped people off at different units, and turn around, come back. But anyway, I finally got up to my unit. Now I'm walking in there by then I was a first lieutenant.
And what's the place called you went to? What was it called, the base?
Phu Hep.
Okay.
It is on the map. It's a little fishing village.
Okay.
Yeah. It's nearest one is Tuiwa Air Force Base is nearby. And but it, and they'd gone in and just put a PSP, pure steel plated runway in there because it was all helicopters. And that's where we were, this little Vietnamese fishing village right on the South China Sea. I mean, we were.
Was it jungly there?
No, it was all flat. And the end of our runway was like 30 feet from the water,
Wow.
I mean, we were right on the beach. And just a big valley there.
What was your first assignment?
I was a pilot.
I know that, but I mean, what was...
No, that's what I did. I'm coming in. I'm sure they were really surprised when they got orders that I was coming because some of those people know my name,
Yeah.
From before. And I'm sure they're sitting there saying, why are we getting a guy that just got promoted to first lieutenant like 2 months before I got there?
When you had all those seasoned guys there too, right?
And everybody else are, minimum of 16 years in the service flying. They all had their wings with the wreaths on them, Were they 15 years?
Were they friendly enough to you?
Oh yeah. Very good. And I remember the first flight I went on. So
that's what I mean. What was the first thing you did when you went there?
I went up and we did a mission somewhere inland. I don't even know where. Now, all I know is flying in flight school. I have not flown an hour outside of flight school.
Yeah.
Don't know anything. And we're up there, and we always flew at very high altitude.
What's very high altitude?
4,000 or 5,000 feet above ground level. 3/4 of a mile.
Yeah.
Out of
gunshot range.
Yeah. Nobody's going to shoot you. But we could do that. So we're flying along, and the guy says, and he's explaining where we are, kind of an orientation of the area and stuff. And I'm up at, we'll say 5,000 feet, whatever. And I'm used to 500 feet. Even in the CH-54 training, it was 500 feet. You didn't, there's so many helicopters at Fort Rucker, you don't want to get mixed up with any other aircraft or anything. So I'm good at 500 feet. I know exactly where that is. But, so I'm way up. And he says, see that thing out there, this little spot out there, he says, we had a sling load on that we were delivering. And he says, and what I want you to do is land there. Well, I'm used to picking up a sight picture that you used in flight school.
Right.
And how you came in, just like the commercial guys do. They come in on the same glide slope and all that, right? I was not trained in tactical flying, and I'm up there and I got the perfect glide slope. And we get down to about 2,000 feet and he says, what are you doing? And I said, well, I'm landing. And he says, you're going to get a shot out of the sky here. You can't do that. We don't do things that way. So that was my first lesson in Vietnam. And he says, no. So he takes the aircraft and we just come straight down. I mean, literally.
Yeah.
You don't fly over enemy territory coming in. You could circle, you could, do something like that. So I said, okay, I got that. Learn that. That was my first flight. I'm sure they had a real good laugh at it back at the 10-ton tavern. That's where our pilots all met. And anyway, that was kind of funny. But no problems. These guys had all they've been flight instructors at flight school. They know what they're doing. And it was kind of interesting. But just immediately, we just started doing things. And we covered North Vietnam, or the northern end of South Vietnam. Okay. That was our position. The other two units, one was down around Saigon, and the other was in the Delta.
And you had 9 copters on that base?
Or
were they spread out?
We had
there?
3 at 6 at Tuiwa, and 3 at Pleiku.
On your base, did you guys ever take? Did they ever mortar you guys? Was that a thing or no?
At Pleiku every night.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, 5 out of 7 nights.
Wow.
You get mortared. Yeah. I was not one of the pilots stationed at Pleiku.
Yeah.
I was too inexperienced.
Well, okay. So give me some of the missions. I know you hauled the artillery. Talk about some of the stuff you did.
Yeah. Well, I was an artillery officer. Now, I'm the only artillery officer in our unit. Now, we only had 4 commissioned officers in our unit. So you had a CO, an XO, you had a maintenance officer, and an operations officer. Everybody, then there were warrant officer pilots, and their job was they flew all the time, right? And so typically you'd have one of those 4 jobs, and then if you did, you'd fly about every 3rd day or so. But we had probably, I think we had right around 25 quote pilots, including the commissioned officers.
And the average time when you went on a mission to do something, how long were you out there? A couple of hours?
Yeah, maybe. Most of our missions, if you were over 4 hours, that was a long day. 4 hours of flight time. The aircraft, we burned 6 gallons a minute worth of fuel.
How big was the gas tank on that thing? How many gallons would it hold?
I'm trying to remember. I think 8,800 gallons.
Wow.
Something like that. 9,000 gallons.
And we talked about this before, the maintenance. I mean, after 25 hours, what was the thing? It needed some heavy maintenance after so many hours.
Well, all the aircraft, military back then, I don't know what they're doing now. At 25 hours, you have to have a full inspection. Up to then, crew chiefs are just fixing things that are written up and stuff. Every 25 hours, it'd be like doing an oil change on your car.
Okay.
That kind of thing. And on CH-54, because of the systems and everything, that took about 3 days.
So every 25 hours, it was 3 days out of commission.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So really, out of the 9, you usually had 6.
Right.
Maybe 7.
Right.
Available. Yeah.
But they had stuff for you guys to do.
Every day we had something to do. We got our orders from a higher command, and we worked for everybody. If you were at a Huey, you were at a Huey company, and you had particular units you were responsible for supporting.
Yeah. We
supported any and everybody. Depends on where they wanted to put us.
Okay.
So for the first 3 months I was in Vietnam, I was basically at flight training, right? With extremely great pilots. And in my case, so for the first 3 months, I flew as co-pilot.
Okay.
Not as aircraft commander.
Right.
I'm not jumping ship, Yeah. These guys all know a lot more about what they're doing than I do. And so I'm flying as co-pilot, which would be right seat. And I really liked the right seat in the crane. I was used to it.
Just feel more natural to you?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. It's like driving a car if you went over to England and all of a sudden they put you on the right side. You don't want to be switching seats back and forth. That was my thought. So I always flew left or right seat.
Even when you were the main pilot on the plane?
In my whole career flying.
Did people always find that weird?
Yeah. Because it forced later the co-pilot to be in the pilot seat. Like you say. And they got more instruments over there. They have more display. But I really liked the right seat. And I always flew the right seat. Just what I did. Nobody ever called me on it or asked me why.
Did they?
I just said, I'll take that.
I know a lot of missions were done at night for safety reasons. Yeah. Well, obviously safety not being shot at as easily.
Yeah.
But clearly the dust off guys I talked to said it was always sketchy at night because it was very hard to tell where you were in relationship to anything.
You don't know.
Did you guys fly many night stuff or was it mostly day?
Not much night. Maybe coming back empty night, but all the work's done during the day because it's too technical.
What were some of the tell me some of the stories about some of the things you did over there that were interesting.
Interesting things. one time we were flying at altitude and in a cloud. We were IFR just because it was cloudy, not because rain or anything like that. It was, and had a C-130 pass right in front of us at 90 degrees to us.
Just
that was, you don't have air traffic control in Vietnam. You don't, you're your own. And I thought, well, this is, we're pretty safe. We're, I don't know, way up there, flying along and in the clouds, so you don't see, and the C-130 went right in front of us. I mean, this was seconds, and you're kind of like, what was that, Another time we were flying, again, we're at altitude because we're traveling, and we hear on the radio that they're going to have an arc flight, I think is what they called it, B-52 drop. And they give you the coordinates just minutes before they do it, right? And we didn't use maps very much flying around Vietnam. You didn't pull out your map and look. You had to know where you were going and what you were doing. And we're flying along and they get this, I pull out a map real quick. And I look there and I'm looking from the coordinates. I still haven't quite found them. And this B-52 attack, probably 3-4 miles ahead of us, goes off we were just flying right towards it. And it just lit up the world. I said, oh, I think I know where it is. I think we just found it. But that was amazing to see a B-52 drop. I don't know if it was multiple aircraft, probably. And arc light, that's what they called it. And you don't want to be on the ground when a B-52 drops. That was absolutely an amazing thing. I've flown over convoys that had been attacked a couple of days earlier and just blown to pieces.
Just trucks and vehicles just devastated.
Yeah. And I'm artillery, so I know how they trapped them and what they did. I know all that kind of stuff to do. And you look at that and you say, gosh, they just knocked out the first vehicle, knocked out the second one, and then just blew everybody else up in the middle, And we were there retrieving some trucks and light armored vehicles and stuff out of there.
When you were hanging,
really bad,
dropping stuff or picking stuff up, were there times you were being shot at, or did you feel vulnerable at those points, or is it hard to tell what's going on at that?
The nice thing, you fly to Huey and it's going whop, 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 and making all this noise. CH-54 is pretty quiet. You got these gigantic gas engines, jet engines above your head, but you got so many earplugs, and your helmet and everything. It's as quiet as we're talking right now. So you really can't hear. I've flown at night and seen tracers coming up at us. Never know they're shooting at you other than you see these tracers, never got as high as we went, though. We always flew at altitude. That's the point. And since there were so few of these aircraft that the military owned, we didn't fly into areas. They had to be cold for 3 days before they would.
They didn't want to take chances with these.
You couldn't lose one of these things. Just couldn't. I mean, it was a necessary piece of equipment and limited supply. Now, we did do things less than 3 days, but if it was less than 3 days, then we always either had a Cobra escort or the Air Force escort. Again, if it was one of the aircraft down or something,
Yeah, talk about recovering aircraft and why that mission was important and some of those.
Well, the issue there was the fact that, especially if you lost an Air Force aircraft, they've got the radios and all the technology in them that you don't want to lose. And they typically have all the frequencies and, all sorts of stuff. And so if an Air Force aircraft was down, they had two choices: either blow it up, or just come in and blow it up to deny the equipment to the enemy, or retrieve it. Our job was to retrieve it. So we did that, but gosh, maybe 1 in 25 you'd retrieve.
Really? Would you go out and find them and then go, this isn't worth getting?
No, they'd already be set up to be like, yeah. Before.
And did you go out with another helicopter of guys that hooked it up to your helicopter?
No, they had,
or they would send them with you guys.
No, that would all be done earlier.
So they're ready to hook on.
There were people that did that. And the problem was, if you're picking up an airplane, you have to make it so it can't fly. So they actually chainsaw the wings.
Wow.
And the tail off of it. I mean, they're not worried about the body of the aircraft.
Right.
Just where all the equipment
What was a typical airplane that they would recover? Was it an F-4 or was it something?
It'd be F-4s, C-130s, C-123s, Jolly Green Giants.
Yeah.
They don't like you saying that. You pick those up.
So a lot of planes were going down, is what you're saying?
No,
not
a lot.
Yeah.
No, not where we were. We were the northern end. Our aircraft were the guys bombing Hanoi and stuff.
Okay.
When they lost aircraft, they didn't send us across the border to go get them. They just blew them.
Yeah.
There was no chance they were going to get recovered. So and that's where they'd get shot at. It'd be up in North Vietnam. And, and if they could make it back to our side, they could probably make it back,
And you would move how often were you moving artillery pieces for them?
Oh, daily.
And what was the gun you were usually moved?
A 155 Howitzer. And we...
Would that be like you'd move like 3 of them in a day or 5 of them in a day when you were moving?
A unit was 4. So if you did 1, you did 4. But you might take 4 from one place and then move all 4 of them to another one. That would happen all in a day. Because when you got to the new place, they had to have the guns, they had to have the ammo, they had to have everything to defend themselves that night,
And then you'd drop off fuel bladders to people all over the place?
Yeah, we had these large fuel bladders, and they would be used to support. Sometimes it was gasoline, but most of the time it was aviation fuel supporting the Hueys or the Chinooks,
right?
Where they were out and they'd waste too much time going back and coming back for fuel, and they wanted to keep them on station. They're moving forward, and we pre-position these fuel bladders for them.
For you, was all the assignments kind of the same, or was there some assignments you hated doing? Or
none I hated.
It was all just...
No, I liked them all. Yeah, there wasn't any that people didn't
You never lost your zest for flying the helicopter over there?
No. That was a good deal. You were talking about, we had these pods, a body that we could attach. And one time we were coming back, finished the day. I only flew typically, my day would be maybe 4 hours of flight time because I had other duties. I ended up being the operations officer for the company. So I'm the guy assigning the pilots to the missions.
Right.
Coordinating the aircraft availability, talking to upper headquarters and all that kind of stuff. So I couldn't be gone for a couple of days, at a time. But so if I went out 4 hours in a crane's that's an 8-hour day or better, because we only had 2.5 hours worth of fuel. And that included the 20-minute reserve. So you had 2 hours, 10 minutes, and now you're on your reserve fuel.
You got to get back.
And you better have some place to go. You got 20 minutes to get. And in our case, our fueling, all the other aircraft, you filled them up like you do at your car. That wasn't us because fuel tanks are 20 feet in the air. So we had the same kind of fueling like they use at the airports, and we took so much fuel. So we had to have high pressure fueling, locked on. So we needed to be at an Air Force base or something like that to get fuel.
Did you ever have any mechanical problems when you're out flying?
Yeah. One time we were at an equipment depot where they were bringing in like trucks and tanks and whatever. You don't see many tanks over in Vietnam, but all this stuff, big area. Well, at times we would pick up deuce and halves and stuff and deliver them to an outlying unit because taking them on the road wasn't safe, right? Or they needed some more to be replacements or something like that. And anyway, we were at this depot, but in that case, we were picking up artillery shells and powder for 175 artillery. That's the really big stuff.
Yeah.
And we were picking up, 20,000 pounds, 22,000 pounds of that stuff. So it's all high explosives and powder for it, fuses, the whole thing. And and I was flying, and we got rigged up and we lifted up, and now they got a fence. I don't know. It's bigger than 12 feet high around there, and come up to a hover to clear the fence. And so we're not even flying. We're just hovering and moving forward. We're not in transitional lift is what they call it. And we haven't gotten there yet. Transitional lift is like your airplane running down the runway. And then when it lifts off, that's when translational lift happens. It actually starts flying. So we were in the runway mode with this load behind us. And we were just cleared the fence. And all of a sudden, our front windshields just got covered with oil. Instantaneously, we couldn't see out of the cockpit. And we're not very far off the ground. We don't really know exactly where we are, within a foot of where we are with all this artillery on it. And I remember, because I raced cars, I was very good at things changing and making corrections. You just do that. It's just what you do. And all of a sudden, the windshield just got covered. And I'm flying. The other guy's, sitting in the left seat there. And he's he's our maintenance guy, or commissioned officer. 2 commissioned officers, you don't ever do that. Don't want to do that. And anyway, but we're there. And so I just reached down and turned on the windshield wipers. Because we actually have windshield wipers, and stuff. And as soon as that happened, I just flipped the switch, and that just smeared everything, because at first you didn't know what it was, but it was hydraulic oil. And anyway, I just flipped that, and it just swiped once or twice, and it just made things worse. The crew chiefs in the back are looking at the load. They don't want to drop it, in the ammo dump. You don't want to drop a bunch of ammo in there. And so that was kind of, so while I'm doing this, I'm looking at the gauge, and I see number 1 engine oil pressure dropping on it. Needles just start to move. And I reached up, we have overhead controls. And I just reached up and killed number one engine. I mean, this all happened so fast you can't believe. I mean, just kill the engine. I am sure the other pilot sitting there just panicked when I turned one engine off, because you got to know which engine it is.
Right.
You know, you don't want to
turn the right one
drop from 50 feet, on a bunch of 20,000 pounds of ammo. And I just killed that engine just so fast. I mean, in a ice blank. And meanwhile, I'm getting traced. The nice thing is the crane can fly at full gross load on one engine.
So the engine was redundant, basically.
Yeah. Yeah. We had lots of horsepower. And so, we know that, but you never do it. But anyway, I killed that engine and and we hit transitional lift and we're flying, and I start making a right turn because it's a Vietnamese village we're going to be flying over. And, so after I made the turn, the other guy, says, I've got the aircraft. So he took control, which was smart. And we were right out on the beach, right? And we just flew out in the ocean, picked the load, half a mile offshore, and flew back and landed in our airfield. No problems flying without a load and everything. But I've often thought if I'd picked the wrong engine, we'd have been in big trouble. Yeah. We'd have been in big trouble. Now you have to appreciate this oil line that we blew is probably, I think, 5 inches ID under super high pressure. But the other side of the coin is if we hadn't killed that engine really fast, we'd also been in gigantic trouble either way. But that's always kind of bothered me, that I just, no thought, no nothing, just straight, this is what you do, that fast.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, that was a good decision. And
what was the probably the most tragic thing you saw over there?
Most tragic thing?
Yeah. Did you see anything that really disturbed you over there?
I wouldn't call this tragic. Well, I could think of 2 things now. Tragic. I was also the civilian personnel officer at our base.
Which meant?
That we hired Vietnamese on the base. So I was responsible for their clearance, bringing them in, getting them off base. I had people doing that, but I was the guy. Yeah. I was the guy that was responsible for that. And we had a little village out there, and we would send a deuce and a half every day down to the village, and they'd pick up the school kids and drive them to a school that was 5 miles away or something, And so you got all the village kids. I mean, they're just hanging off this deuce and a half, right? Going to the school each day. One day they blew that truck up, killed all the kids in the village. Yeah, just school kids going to school. Yeah, not a military exercise or anything, just that's what we did, And, they attacked that thing and just killed everybody.
Mm.
I think that's pretty tragic.
That's pretty tragic.
We had hooch maids over there. The officers did. And I lived in a very nice, had a private room, air conditioned. I had hot and cold running water in my room. I had a nice desk and lighting and, they treated CH-54 pilots super well, kind of like the Air Force does.
Yeah.
What
was the food like over there?
We had really good food. This is terrible. We're out flying. there were some islands off of where we were, not very far out, 2 miles, 3 miles offshore or something out there. And they grew crops out there, and they fished off those islands and stuff. So a lot of times when we had an aircraft that was flying north, when we came back, we'd always go out over the ocean. We didn't fly
Right.
cross country back to, we'd head east, go to the ocean, half a mile offshore, fly down the coast.
Yeah.
That's what we did. And we'd visit the islands. You could stop at the islands. One of the islands had a hamburger stand. They made the best bacon, egg, cheeseburger hamburgers. I mean, really good ones. And you stop there, and the Hueys, they were flying up down the coast. You'd always stop at the hamburger place.
That's funny.
Kind of like the bar in Top Gun, type of thing. It was, you could stop there and get something to eat, but then you could pick up lobster and fish and all sorts of stuff there. So the officers, there's just a few number of us and stuff. Both states we had barbecue out there. We always had steak and lobster and all the good stuff to barbecue. Yeah.
Did you do an R&R?
Did.
Where did you go?
Hawaii.
Is that fun?
Yeah.
How long had you been out when you went?
You haven't been on R&R, have you?
Well, you know what? I've always thought for myself, because I've actually known a few guys who didn't take it because they didn't want to have to come back. You know what I mean?
That could be true.
They just said, I'd rather just stay here and just finish out, because if I leave, I might not get back on that plane to come back.
No, we did. We met my wife over at Honolulu. And,
How long had you been in Vietnam when you took R&R?
Oh, probably 9 months.
Oh.
Yeah, towards the...
So how did it end? What happened? What year were you were there in 69?
All of 69, January 69 to January 70.
Okay. Then what happened at the end?
I got returned back to the States and ended up going to the artillery advanced course, which is like getting a master's degree in artillery.
Yeah.
And that's another 9-10-month course. And so I went back there and did that. That's more higher level tactics, more at battalion, group level.
Yeah.
Type stuff. And basically that's, you've been picked to be promoted to a major. It's typically is the deal, because I was a captain.
Yeah.
By that time. And so I went to field artillery course. That was good. Learned a lot of stuff.
At this point, you think you're going to make the Army your career?
No, I'm just burning up commitment.
You're burning up those, just whatever's left.
Yeah. And, but that would have been 71. 71, 72 that I was in the advanced course. And, so all of a sudden advancements just kind of stopped. I mean, I went, lieutenants, first lieutenant 1 year captain, maybe 2 or 3 years as a captain and you were a major, was kind of what was going on.
Is the architect thing still in your brain at all? Or is that gone now?
No, I used that. When I was in Vietnam, odd things happened to me. Because they look up there and they say, "Oh, you've had an engineering and architecture and all that." I got to build things. I built a really large enlisted man's club.
Oh, that's cool.
I did, out of just scrap materials over there, and Yeah, and I also got to clear minefields.
Oh, tell that story.
For artillery units. When they, and I don't know why, they just said, oh, well, you've got an engineering degree and architecture and all that. So a couple of times when they were moving an artillery unit from one fire base to a new one, a couple of times the new one was one left over from the French.
Okay.
And the French always put minefields in front of their, downhill from them. Unfortunately, the mines move over time. That's the first thing it happened. And two, they apparently didn't give the plans to the Americans, So they look at me and say, oh, you're artillery, engineer, architect, and all that. Well, you could go out there and clear the, the base out there and design where the guns are going to go, where you're going to place them, how you're going to do it, build the fire base before they get there.
Yeah.
Kind of a thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That was always fun. And
how would you clear the mines?
With a bayonet on your hands and knees.
Did you go out and do that?
No, I had guys.
You had guys do that. I was going to say.
I demonstrated. No, yeah. You just, in my case, you get a bunch of enlisted artillery guys that are, and they think you're nuts and say, what you got to do is take this bayonet.
How many would you end up clearing to clear the space? Hundreds?
Hundreds, thousands. I just,
that's insane.
And you don't know what kind they are. You don't
how
know
how unstable they are.
Yeah, which way they're facing, because over time they turn over.
Yeah. Instead
of being straight up, they're this way, and hit it the wrong way or something. Anyway, it's kind of interesting, but yeah. So they said, "Oh, you could do that. You do surveying. You can do all that stuff." I said, "Yeah, I can do that." But
okay, take me to.
That was fun. I did that for one of my.
Yeah, that's great.
A guy, Apple was his name, was in my OCS class, and he was the company commander then of an artillery unit. And I cleared the fire base that he was going to, and then we met.
Tell me the story. I want to hear that story when you were at the very last thing you did in Arizona in that. Give me the little lead up to that.
Well, let me tell you one other thing. Okay. Can I do that?
Sure.
I was in Vietnam. Probably a couple months before I left. I was the operations officer of the company. So I was the guy responsible for putting pilots on the aircraft on the missions. The good news is all our pilots were great, so it wasn't like
you were assigning them to things.
Yeah, yeah. And that's hard because you have to, this is a really bad mission. There's a chance you get hurt on this mission, So what do? Do you send your best 2 pilots? Do you send your worst 2? No, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
What do you want to do? Well, the point is you want to get the mission complete. That's the first thing. And so some of your best pilots, could end up getting most of the mission. That's what was happening in the Hueys and stuff.
Right.
The best guys were in the worst conditions.
Right.
You're not so good pilots. They were the guys following.
You're right.
Behind us. I mean, that's just the way it was.
Yeah, for sure.
We didn't do it that way. We just had a list, and we just went down the list. All the pilots were the same. But, it really kind of bothers you when you're assigning somebody to something that could be life-threatening for sure. That can get with you a little bit. And, but anyway, we were over there and we got this mission, came down from the Department of the Army directly to us. And they said, well, we need a crane at such and such a place we never go to. Never been out in that area, familiar with it at all. And it was right on the Laos border. And there was a little strip out there. And I took the mission. Didn't know what it was or anything else. I said, I'll go. And then, son of a gun, if our company commander said, oh, well, I'll go with you. You know? And it goes back, don't ever put two commissioned officers in the same airplane. Don't do that. Don't do that. But didn't know what it was. So he said, okay. So we jump in the airplane. I'm the aircraft commander because the company commander gets less hours than I do, right? He doesn't fly very often at all. And I'm flying. Anyway, we go out. We land at where we're supposed to land. And they had refueling out there, and they refueled us. And we walked into a little command bunker that was underground, right? Full of generals. I mean, it could have been a dozen. 3-star, 2-star, 1-star generals. Air Force and Army, both. And that's where we were supposed to get our mission. Up to then, we didn't have any. Just go here, be here at this time. You're okay. Walk in there, and it's kind of like, oh my gosh, what's going on? So this guy is 2-star general, briefs me, and he says, well, we've got this special forces unit stuck on an 11,000-foot pinnacle that overlooks the Ho Chi Minh Trail. It is literally a pinnacle. And he says, they've been out there and they're up there, checking what's going on over in Laos. And we want to pull them out because, nobody knows this, but the North Vietnamese actually did have tanks. They did have artillery. They did have that stuff. I've seen it, and everything. And he says, because they're sitting right where they are, the Laotian or the North Vietnamese figured out where they are, and they brought in artillery, and they're getting artillery out there. And he says they've been under fire for over a week, and they're like on a 2-acre spot on the top of this pinnacle, and they're all special forces, and he says, we sent in some Hueys to pull them out because there's only, I think, 8 or 10 of them, something like small number. We sent in 2 Hueys to pull them out. And he says, they got shot down. That was like 4 days earlier. And we lost both Hueys and the pilots. So then we tried it at night, and we lost the aircraft and the pilots. Meanwhile, he says they're continually getting bombarded, and they don't have any more ammo. They've run out of water. We can't resupply them. They tried a Chinook, and they lost the Chinook 2 days before we were there. And he says, so here's what we want you to do. We want you to go out there, and they had a D7 bulldozer out there. And he said, we want you to pick up that bulldozer and deliver it to the top of that peak. I go, really? And they said, and it's going to be running. It's already going to be started and running. They haven't got time to start it and make sure it runs or anything. The engine's going to be running. Everything's there. I said, they got somebody up there that can run a bulldozer? And he says, well, the idea is they want to cut a gigantic slot up there. And you say, why do you send the biggest helicopter when you lost the small ones, And he says, yeah, and this is 11,000 feet. And they tell us where it is from where we are. And our poor company commander is supposed to know what he's doing, but I know more than he does, for sure. And going over the, the fuel and all this stuff, And I said, I don't know. We'll go out. We'll try picking up the bulldozer. I said, 11,000 feet is going to be kind of hard with the bulldozer, And we go out and we hook up to it, and we can't pick it up off the ground. And I came back and I shut down, and I went back in and I said, gee, we could just get it light, but we can't get it off the ground. And this general says, what do you mean you can't get it off the ground? How much power were you pulling? And I said, 76% power. That was our limit. We had 100%.
Yeah.
But we could only pull 70. If we pulled over that, it would blow the gearbox out of the helicopter. Too much torque.
Yeah.
And so anyway, so the deal was, and he says, how much fuel you got? And I said, oh, we got 2/3 of a tank of fuel. And he says, well, go out there and hook onto that thing and burn that fuel down until you pick it up. Right? So we go out there and we're hovering for like 20 minutes, 25 minutes at for us, 100% power, 76% power, and burning off fuel. Well, then I'm looking down and I said, we haven't got enough fuel. We can pick it up now, but we don't have enough fuel. So I sidestep, set it back down. We go back in and say, we don't have enough fuel now. We can pick it up. And we're like at 4,000 feet. You want us to go to 11, we'll burn off fuel going there. But we don't have enough fuel to get back. And this general looks at me, he says, we just want that delivered. He says, you're going to, we want you to go and deliver that thing. He says, if you're low on fuel, you just pick a place to land and we'll send, like a Huey head to pick you guys up, and then we'll destroy the aircraft. and I think to myself, oh, now all of a sudden they're willing to destroy a CH-54 for delivering a bulldozer to a bunch of guys sitting on top of this pinnacle. And he was dead serious. And I said, I got to burn off more fuel before I can fly it, But he says, no. He says, this is what we're going to do. You're going to do it. And we had a peculiar heading we had to go in on. I'll say it's 225 degrees. I forgot what it was. And he says, you fly that. You don't deviate from that heading. You're going to go directly onto that. As soon as you deliver it, you go vertically straight up. We don't want you to go right, left, backwards, forwards. Deliver it straight up. And that's all we had. Deliver this thing on this heading and disappear going up. And we could outclimb an F4 to 10,000 feet. That was another one of we were really fast at
going
up. And so that wasn't the problem. Anyway, I go back, we burn off some more fuel, tell the crew, said, this is what we're doing. And nobody argued. Nobody said anything. Just, that's what we're going to do. But they know that this doesn't sound real hot, We get the thing off the ground and try to go forward a little, and it would hit the ground. And then it would pick up and hit. But meantime, we're gaining a little speed each time, We get to the end of this open area, and there's a big fence, right? The bulldozer wasn't enough off the ground to clear the fence. We went right through their security fence, all this barbed wire, ribbon wire fence. Went right through it with a bulldozer. And it rips the fence out. Now we got a bulldozer with a bunch of wire hanging off of it, And you say, well, that isn't going to do anybody any good, but we took off. So we're flying. It takes 20, 25 minutes to get there. And we're trying to gain altitude. We could get 10,000 feet. Couldn't get 11 to save our life. I mean, at 76%. And the guy says, you got 25% more to pull, just do it. He says, I know you have the power, which is true, but you tear the airplane apart. You had 5 seconds. So I start upping the power. Next thing we're at 80, we're at 85%. We're watching the oil pressure and temperatures, and we're still okay on that, So I said, that's okay. Maybe we can pull a little more. But anyway, we get to where we get to this pinnacle. We're short. Not much, but maybe 100 feet. So I tell him, I said, well, what we're going to do is we'll pull 100% and get up over that lip, and we'll drop that thing in there. We get pulled 100%, never did that. Never pulled over 76% in my life. And we pulled that, and we didn't gain any. Unfortunately, the wind we're in the headwind, and when it comes over the pinnacle, you get a downdraft. And we hit that, and we lost some altitude. And we ran into the side of the pinnacle. Now, the rotor blade's 72 feet, length of the rotors. And our rotors in front of us, we can see out the window, hit the side of a cliff. And the first 3 foot on those rotors is a fiberglass tip. And we just ripped the tips right off the rotors, literally. And we just couldn't do it. And we hit that, and our crew chief's back there, dumped the bulldozer, when it was obvious we were going to hit, and they punched the bulldozer off. I pulled back, and we went straight up out the bulldozer
down the mountain,
and thinking, gosh, this wasn't good. We didn't even get the mission done. Well, when we're coming in on that angle, Air Force jets are coming in on both sides of us, bombing. I mean, this is all they didn't tell us they were going to do that. But when we're coming in, jets coming in, doing all their stuff, right? Artillery is firing all around us. Luckily, they were lower than we were, coming in. And they just blowing the world to pieces when we were coming. I mean, this is all going on while I'm trying to get this helicopter up there. And the place up there is getting artillery fire from the North Vietnamese. They're joined in all this. I mean, this place is on fire, literally. Anyway, pull up. We go out. We don't have enough fuel to get back on the fuel gauge. I said, geez, we got to find a place to land this thing. Plus, it's screaming. The rotors are just screaming because we've knocked the tip caps off of them, and they're all doing this, and all that. And anyway, we had a chance, and we actually made it back on the fuel. We decided, well, we're not going to land there. We got to get further away. This isn't a good thing. But we did get back on the fuel. I don't know how much we had left. I mean, the gauge is empty, but there's still fuel in it. And we got back. So we left the helicopter there. Now it's got to go back to the States. We've blown the whole drivetrain in it and everything, That was the first flying crane that went back to the States for rebuild. And the next morning, I'm in the operations office, and I get this memo, and they said, congratulating us on the great thing we did. And I'm sitting here saying, what did we do? Other than severely damage an expensive airplane and took it out of service and all that. What they did, we were a decoy. We were an expendable decoy to what happened. the reason they had a CH-54 come in and do that was so they could blow up all this stuff, which is actually on the backside from Laos, right, of the pinnacle. That night, they brought in the high altitude parachuting guys.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like at 30,000 feet. At night, they jumped out and landed on that 2 acres in the dark.
Wow.
Right? Now, these guys are all special forces guys down here. And they landed them there. They brought in rappelling gear. Right? And at night, they rappelled off that pinnacle. In the area we went in, they hiked them right out that because they knew it was destroyed down there. And it was definitely to the other guys.
Wow.
And by sunlight, they had them all off of the thing. It hiked them out enough that they picked them up with some of their aircraft. Right? So we were just the diversion or the reason to get those guys off of that. That resulted in me getting the Bronze Star. That's why I got a Bronze Star. And I'd say, really? For what? All we did is destroy our helicopter. But 4 of us got out of there for some odd reason. I'm the only one that got accommodation. Don't know who put it in. Didn't come from our unit or anything.
Right.
So,
that's wild. My goodness.
But I ended up with a Bronze Star. I don't think anybody in the unit even know he got it. They didn't do a ceremony or anything.
Wow. So what's your take on that now? Looking back on that mission, you mad they didn't tell you?
No, it's good they didn't. They didn't want us to know anything about what's going on. I mean, we could have got captured or something.
Yeah.
No, it's all, you just do this, they do this, they do that. It all works out, Apparently that's why that general was so,
insistent.
Just go do that, whatever, We just need the diversion.
They had it all in place, everything else.
Yeah. But you never saw about so much artillery and fighter jets and everything, but it was all the angle that we went in on was the hot deal because they were also firing on the guys, but they'd moved artillery pieces, within range and stuff to cover all this too.
Okay, now I want to hear that other story you told me.
Oh, when I got out of the service, I was RIF'd, reduction in force, in 75, and virtually all the commissioned officers I was in Germany at the time with another crane company, and virtually all the commissioned officers got RIF'd. And we didn't know, but actually what they were doing was doing away with the CH-54s in the active military.
Right.
So I go to, I had a choice of where to go to be discharged. So we picked Fort Huachuca, Arizona, because that's where I went into the service from school. And I got held up for quite a while on my discharge. And it was really odd. When I checked into Fort Huachuca, the post commander there let me just go back up to Phoenix where we're moving. And during the time we bought a house and moved we had a motorhome in Germany. It had already come across the ocean and arrived, in Long Beach, and we'd picked it up and, and nobody was concerned that I was just running around Arizona in civilian clothes, not doing anything, just checking in once a week to tell them where I was. Eventually, the company or the post commander called me and wanted me back down to Fort Huachuca. took our motor home, went down there, and instructed me that just to go to a billets, old World War II type barracks thing, and take the elevator down. I said, okay. And there was an elevator in the building, this old wooden building. Took it down. There, I don't know, maybe 5, like colonels, lieutenant colonels type guys in there. And they just turned around and said, answer a phone if it rings, and there's a bank of maybe 20 phones on the wall. and they all laughed. They all said, we've got a meeting we got to go to, just answer the phones. And I don't know where I am. I'm underground someplace in Fort Huachuca with a bunch of phones. And then the phone started ringing, and found out who's on the phones is the president and the vice president and the main guy in the summit or in the Senate.
The Senate, yeah.
In Congress, and then the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and it just,
just
Secretary
one phone
of Defense,
call after another.
And it's just one after another, just, in a great rhythm. And the first one I answered was from the president, the guy that carries his phone for him. And it ends up there just doing commo checks, which they do continuously. By the time number 20 or whatever it was is finished, maybe a couple of minutes later, then number 1 starts over, and it just keeps going, and they continuously check. I'm talking to SAC, and I'm talking to the Navy, and I'm talking to, all these people. And
are you thinking, why am I down here?
Yeah, with no instructions. And anyway, so that's when the Third World War starts. And ends up Fort Huachuca as a communications center for all the militaries. And anyway, finally, a couple hours later, these guys come back and dismiss me and tell me go back up and see the post commander, go up and see him. They were having a worldwide exercise. NATO was. First one, I understood, that they'd had where they were actually, it wasn't a paper exercise. They were actually going to load aircraft, POR guys, give them their shots, do, everything. And they were going to do that worldwide, the NATO guys. And it was all being controlled out of Fort Huachuca. The plan was that I was supposed to direct that.
And they didn't tell you that?
No, not until I got there. And the reason is they just want somebody that doesn't know what they're doing to see if their system's bulletproof in a sense. But I also had all the clearances, which most people didn't have. And so I had the clearances to be there. So anyway, that's apparently why they were delaying my departure. And so I spent 3 days directing the Joint Chiefs of Staff on what they were supposed to be doing. And
describe the room when that was going on.
Oh, yeah, the room's kind of U-shaped. It's a big room, curtains. So it's pretty soundproof, but it's a big room, but it's got curtains all around it. It does have a movie screen at the front that you could display stuff on, but nothing super fancy. But lots of generals there, because you had the Joint Chiefs of Staff, each one of the department, each one of the guys there, and then they have their entourage there, and then they have people back wherever they are, and they pass the orders down, the Navy does it, the Air Force does it, Coast Guard, everybody. And so I'm up there getting handed pieces of paper from people on the right and left of me who have the plan, and they already have the operation orders.
You're kind of MC in this event.
I'm the MC. So they would hand me a piece of paper, and I would read it and command a 4-star general, to move 3 aircraft carriers or whatever, admiral,
And that must have been surreal.
And it was interesting. I didn't know what I was reading. I mean, I just don't see it ahead of time. And these guys are putting it up on the screen, other people are. So I'm just reading. But then, the next day I'm getting reports, give them timelines, have to have this done, have to have this done, this done, this done, where their troops are going, why they're going, And so this whole battle plan is being laid out in coordination with the NATO. This is all coming through here too, So, and it was extremely I learned more about the military just reading these orders to these guys. But it was fun getting the reports back because they continuously failing to meet the time period. Or, I mean, one thing, they were putting down at Fort Bragg, they were PORing all these infantry guys, and they found out they didn't have enough shots. We wanted, 10,000 troops loaded on this Navy ship or something, at 4:00 tomorrow afternoon, weapons, field gear, everything ready to go, so they had 20 hours to do that. That's what and they found out, oh, well, we don't have all the field gear. But the big deal is they didn't have the shots.
Best laid plans. It was harder to implement than to give the order.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that was just a simple failure. But it was just the aircraft, the Air Force didn't have enough fuel to fuel the aircraft to fly to Europe. The C-5As and the big stuff. And where they had to refuel didn't have enough fuel, to refuel 5 C-5As in a row, in a 3-hour period of time.
So this went on 3 days.
Yeah.
And how did it end?
I think we won the war. That was for all the guys sitting around me to figure out whether it actually worked. But what they were doing was checking loading plans.
Yeah.
And how do you move all this stuff? But loading plans were wrong. There was equipment they couldn't load on aircraft because they'd grown heavier. Or, whip antennas was a big deal because when they wrote the plans, they came out with a new radio thing and longer whip antennas to put on all the vehicles. And they weren't easily removable. They were bolted on, type of thing, as opposed to something where you could go in and pull 2 pins and drop the antenna.
Right.
Nobody thought about, we got to put these in an airplane or we got to put them on a ship with a head clearance.
Yeah.
And that didn't work. Anyway, lots of issues. When I finished my part of it, I went down to an office down there and got discharged.
How'd that feel when you were discharged?
I don't know. It was okay. My plan was to get discharged.
Yeah.
I didn't know I'd go out, flaming.
It seems like you enjoyed your time in the military, though.
I did. Absolutely.
They say, okay, we're done. You got released.
Yes. I got my DD-214 done, vacation pay and all that kind of stuff. And I go to walk out the door I came in. And the guy that handed me the paperwork, he says, no. He says, don't go that way. You need to go through this door. And I thought, well, maybe they don't like me and they're going to throw me out the back door. And so I walked through the door. It's in the same building. It's just a wall with a door in it. I walked through the door and there's, 5 or 6 people from the Arizona National Guard back there. And they're sitting there waiting for me.
They're waiting for you?
Waiting for me. Had been there for a while, I guess. And they said, we want to talk to you about joining the Arizona National Guard. And I said, I just got out of the Army 5 minutes ago, and I'm not really interested in joining the Guard. I've already been in the service for 10 or 11 years at that time, And I said, no, I'm not interested in that. And they said, no, you got to sit down and listen to us. Let us explain this to you. And it wasn't your normal recruiting thing. And their point was, gee, you can join the Guard. You can tell us what rank you want to be. I didn't know they could do that, but the governor runs the state deal, and he can make any rank he wants you. Doesn't go through the president, goes through the governor, And they said, you can, tell us what rank you want to be, and we can do that. And I'm thinking, this is really nuts. And they said, and you don't have to wear a uniform. And all you have to do, and we'd already bought a house in Phoenix by then. And there's Papago Airfield, Army Airfield in Phoenix. I don't know if you're familiar with that. Real nice little airfield there, helicopter airfield there. And it's like 3 or 4 miles from where we bought our house. And he says, we got Papago Airfield there. And he says, all you have to do is show up, 1 weekend a month, go fly some helicopters, no uniform, just a flight suit, and do that, And I said, what's the deal here, Oh, that's all you have to do, And so I said, okay. Well, I didn't have a job then.
Yeah.
Hadn't been released yet. And I thought, well, maybe that's a good backup, So they talked me into that with all sorts of dangling carrots.
Did you sign it that day?
Yeah, I was in the National Guard. 2 hours or something after I got discharged. So that was fine. And I said, well, when do I report it? What do I do? They said, oh, well, at the airfield, whenever you're ready, And I said, really? Okay, I can do that. So anyway, I signed that, and I said, I'll just stay a captain. What we did. And this one guy comes and said, don't you want to be a major? You could be a lieutenant colonel. And I said, doing what? And he said, I'll just stay a captain. I don't know what's going on. I'll just stay where I am. And they even offered to make me an enlisted. They said, if you want to be a first sergeant, we'll make you a first sergeant. Just tell us, Anyway, it was really odd. And so but I did that. I ended up the airfield commander at the Papago Airfield. So the pilots and the aircraft and the maintenance at Papago.
Was that just a once a month thing?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And then they said, how hard is this? This, and just show up wearing a flight suit, meet with the pilots, put them in some airplanes, all decide to meet up at the Flagstaff for lunch,
That is really odd.
And go over and, just get the list of available aircraft. And
what copters were you flying there?
Hueys and OH-58s.
Okay.
Which I flew some because they had a Huey and OH-58 assigned to our company for transportation, fly a flying crane to go someplace.
Yeah.
So, I'm qualified on them and everything. But anyway, so I show up for the first thing. Pilots are sitting there. They're all every one of them is a pilot in civilian life. They're flying a police helicopter. They're flying medevacs. They're
the news helicopter.
A couple of them are commercial pilots. Every one of them, And so there wasn't much to be concerned about what they're doing. They know what they're doing. And that was fine. And I just give them a list, send them some aircraft and say, well, we'll go out and do pinnacles today. So just go fly, land on a couple pinnacles, and typically we go up to Flagstaff, have lunch, fly back, and that was the end of the day, But that was okay. That went for a couple months, right? And then this colonel that I work for calls me in. He says, we just made you the Arizona aviation officer for Arizona. He said, what does that mean? It says, oh, well, the state owns aircraft. So you're responsible for the state aircraft also. Now they're flying out of regular airport, not the military one. And he says, and then you have to approve the flights for those aircraft. Okay. And then a couple of weeks later, now you're the state nuclear weapons officer, because I'm nuclear weapons qualified, right? And so I'm the guy that, I guess if you have an atomic explosion in Arizona, I'm the guy that's supposed to know where the wind's blowing, which way the radiation's going, all that kind of stuff. So I'm on the state emergency response or whatever it is, for nuclear explosions or something. Well, we have, you got trucks driving through the state with nuclear weapons on them and radiation and all that, so you do that one. And I'm still just coming in once a week, but now I'm on now I'm meeting every Thursday night downtown Phoenix with the headquarters. I don't know, it was a battalion group or whatever it was. I can't remember, for the state. The next thing I know, the guy that's over the National Guard, Arizona, calls me in. He says, I've got orders for you here to go to the Command and General Staff College in San Diego. And, why do I need to go to Command and General Staff? And why do I need to go to the Navy's Command and General Staff College, right? And he says, well, that's the closest one to us. They're he says, that counts. And he says, it's I think it was 2 weekends every month. And I said, well, I live in Arizona. That's in San Diego. How am I supposed to get there and back? And he says, well, just take one of the airplanes, take one of the helicopters, take a Huey. You're a pilot, just fly yourself over there and fly yourself back. Anyways, it was really odd. And I said, I don't really have any desire to go Command and General Staff College. And he says, oh, well, you need that because Arizona was MPs. That's what the whole state was, MPs.
Okay.
Really simple. In my mind, probably isn't, but they were MPs. He says, oh, well, I've got orders here. We're converting from MPs to artillery. And you're the only artillery officer we have in the car. And I'm thinking, now I know why they were, and he says, and those CH-54s you were flying in Germany are being assigned to us. They're going to be at Papago Airfield. And I said, really? Is that true? And he says, yeah. And we have the slightest idea. All our pilots are Huey pilots, basically. You know what I mean? And we've got to train them all in CH-54s. We got to take all the MPs and train them in field artillery. And you just happen to click all the boxes. I mean, I'm qualified to train fire direction and all that. Never been in an artillery unit, but I had lots of training, you know. Oh, and we'll be a nuclear weapon, nuclear capable unit. And you just happen to have that rating and and you are artillery and you are aviation and, and all this stuff I'd been through. And he says, you have everything we need. So we're going to send you to Command and General Staff College, promote you, and put you in charge of the...
Is that like a full-time job
of the conversion,
point?
Yeah. And he's talking about going full-time. And I said, no, I'm not going full-time. I had a very good job when I got out, and they were already driving me nuts. I was getting 3-4 phone calls a day.
That is a crazy story. So how did that end?
Before that, they had to go to summer camp. So this was like in March or something. And they had to go to summer camp for 2 weeks. He says, we're going back to Fort Huachuca, and that's going to be our first live fire. That's where we're going to introduce these guys to artillery, And so he says, put you in charge of setting up all the training and all this stuff and everything, for the live fire. And I said, I'm not interested in that, just not interested in it. But I said, what I'll do, I'll take the unit, take the guard down to Fort Huachuca, do the 2 weeks, do the fire and all that. I'll form the convoy back to Phoenix. I'm going to take a CH-50 or an OH-58. I'm going to fly back to Papago. I'll get there before they get there. I'm going to get out of that helicopter, get my car, and you're never going to see me again. He didn't have a choice. He didn't have any other choices, literally. And went down to Fort Huachuca and handled the whole thing, right? Got in that OH-58, flew back, got my car, drove home, never signed anything, never turned in anything, never did anything. I just went home. And now for, a month or so later, I'm getting phone calls. Oh, you need to come in. The supply sergeant was nuts. Oh, you got to turn in your flight gear. You got to turn in your field gear. And I said, I only live 4 miles from you. You can come here and get it. I'm not bringing it into you. I'm not even going through that front gate.
That's a high pressure sales job, man. Holy smokes.
And I don't, I don't even have a discharge thing from the Arizona National Guard. I mean, I never went in and did any paper. I didn't do anything. I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it.
That is wild.
And the only thing I have is a report, on what I did for a job. It's the only piece of paper I have from the Guard.
Wow.
And that was drawn up before we went down to Fort Huachuca so they could put me in the Command and General Staff College deal,
And you never talked to him again?
No, just on the phone.
Wow.
And I just told him, I said, no, I not do. I said, go talk to the general. I told him I was going to do. That's what I did. I'm not going to be there when you get there, So now for years, many years after I got out of the service, I was contacted by the Department of the Army about every 6 months, wanting me. I was in Oklahoma or Oregon by then, and they wanted me to go down to Newport Beach where they had a Coast Guard thing, and they had their helicopters and stuff, and they wanted me to fly 4 hours a month, the Coast Guard helicopters down there. And they said, we'll pay you, 4 days, it's pay, just drive 4 hours of flight. We'll pay you a day's pay for each hour. Just drive down there, fly our airplane, keep current. That's all you have to do. You don't have to do anything. That went on for 5 years.
Wow.
because they wanted me to keep my CH-54 rating up. And I said, no.
There's probably not many guys that fly them now, is there, that have the experience?
No, very few. Yeah, back 5 years ago, I got a phone call to fly one civilian, putting up, they're doing a cross-country power line with the gigantic metal deals, and they were setting them up on the CH-54, and they wanted a pilot to do that. And I said, no, I'm not going to do that. I mean, I'm already 75, 76 years old, and they're looking, and they got my number. All the other guys I flew with are all older.
Yeah.
I mean, they're all gone.
Yeah.
And
so
anyway, very, very interesting.
Yeah, very.
But the last time I flew a helicopter was probably, it was about 5 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah. Just for myself.
Yeah. Wrapping it up, what's your take on your experience over in Vietnam and just your experience in the military for you?
I believe before you graduate from high school is a male, part of high school graduation should be basic training in AIT. Don't have to join the service.
Just go have some discipline and learn some things.
And learn some things and get a job. I mean, get a job skill that's really trained, really good. You know what you're doing when you leave it. And that doesn't mean, if you want to become a lawyer, it doesn't hurt to know how to do radios.
Yeah.
Or drive a tank. No, I mean, just the experience.
Yeah.
Because you'll never get that experience anyplace else. I mean, where else? The other day, the first destroyers that went through the Strait of Hormuz, the Navy general, admiral, I guess it is, that's over that, went and flew out to that ship to tell them that they're going to be the first guys through there, be ready, and gave them a pep talk, right? Now he's on the television reporting, and he says, I was out there. They'd already been through now out there. And he says, I go up to the helm to talk to the guys that are going to be up there in the bridge, right? And he says, guess who's driving that thing? A 19-year-old. A 19-year-old is going to drive that destroyer through the Strait of Hormuz. And he says, he's perfectly qualified to do it, But where else do you get the experiences? But that's true for anybody here.
Yeah.
Where else? And it's a great time to do it when you're 18, 19, 20 years old.
Yeah, when, talking to those dust-off, because one of the dust-off pilots I talked to was 21.
Yeah.
And he was doing really adult things, really hard things.
Exactly. I mean, I'm geez, I don't know, 25, and I got credentials to launch nuclear weapons without upside permission.
Yeah. I
mean, if you're flying a B-52, nobody's going to tell you to do something. If you're in a submarine, your communications may be gone, and somebody's got to launch if that's necessary. Make a decision. And so I got one of those credentials, for the artillery, side. And I don't know what they do nowadays, but you had to have, But where else are you going to be a 20-year-old?
Yeah. Yep.
And literally have control of a nuclear weapon that you can launch.
Yeah. Yeah.
Without talking to anybody. I mean, the responsibility you get pays off the rest of your life.
Yeah.
It does.
Well, you've lived an interesting life, Jim.
So anyway,
Those are good
it's different.
stories.
Yeah.
Those are really good stories.
So,
Thank you so
Okay.
much. Thank you for sharing.
you're welcome. Thank you for the interview.
That was really
Appreciate
cool,
it.
man.